Hey everyone, Pastor George here with Culture Thursdays, and I thought I would take a break from the heavy election stuff to talk about video games. And I know I've talked about books before, I know I've talked about movies before on the Culture Thursdays thing, but I really haven't talked about video games that much, which is kind of funny because out of like all the media that I kind of consume, like video games are probably the most, if not books. It's like between those two things. And so I don't know. I always think it's interesting how video games kind of treat Christianity, whether or not they do a good job with it or how they present things from history and things like that. And a game came out on Tuesday, which I think is a very good example of bias, I guess I would say, against Christianity in the general video games industry. Obviously, it's kind of like I mean, everyone knows this. Like, you can kind of insult uh, any part of the Christian religion in the United States and in the West generally, and people really won't get that offended by it because it's been on the making fun of block for so long. In a way that other religions aren't, right? Where it can be kind of seen as bad in bad taste to make fun of other religions, and so or to present them in a negative light. And so I actually kind of got a taste of this recently in a game that I was playing called Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Now, if you've ever played, well, I'm sure many of you haven't, but if you have kids, maybe they've played Assassin's Creed. Maybe you have. I don't know. But just to give you the full rundown of what Assassin's Creed is it's this game series, kind of action games, where you play as a character in some sort of historical time frame. And the cool part about them is for history geeks like me is they do a pretty good job of trying to recreate the world physically. I'll never say most of like how the characters act. They do a pretty poor job with that. But of like physically going back in time. And so you can run around like ancient Alexandria in Egypt, and they've pretty much recreated it to the best of their ability with historical help and stuff like that. And it's really cool. Or ancient Greece, or medieval Italy, or Renaissance Italy, or Constantinople, and all these other places, Paris in the 1700s, England and London in the 1800s, right? The United States during the colonial period. You can run around Boston. It's cool. And so, like, each series, each game is kind of a different place. And so this one, if you can't tell by the name, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, it takes place during the Viking Age, which was the 800s, roughly 800, 900s AD. And that's when the Vikings from Scandinavia began raiding all over Europe, specifically their invasion of England, which is why we have a lot of kind of Scandinavian words in our language. We might not know they're there, but they're there. And so there was a lot of cross cultural stuff there, obviously coming in the form of violence, right? Of Vikings sailing out of Scandinavia and conquering and raiding other places, namely in the British Isles, but France and Germany and kind of a lot of different places, Russia. And so in it, you play as a Viking. And one of the things that they're really big on in the game is sacking towns to get bonuses and stuff like that. So you go around and you sack villages and sack cities and stuff like that, and you take things. And of course, it's very sanitized. They really leave out a lot of the what I would say accompanied many of these things, which is understandable. It's a game. You want people to have fun. You don't want to hit them too hard with the actual history. But one of the things that is pretty often is like you burn down churches quite a bit, and you also attack Christian monasteries a lot, right? And this is something that the Vikings did because they knew that the monasteries and the churches is where all the gold was kept usually. So they would come and take over. Now, the thing about the Vikings, and this game doesn't shy away from this, is that they're pagan, right? That they were polytheists that worshiped the Norse gods, and the Norse gods believed, well, not they believed because they're not real, but they believed that their gods demanded blood, and in the sense of the best way to honor the gods was through violence, right? The name of the game itself, Valhalla, was the place where great warriors would go when they would die, right? Now, I love Scandinavian history. Obviously, you guys know I am of Scandinavian background, right? The blonde hair and blue eyes didn't give it away. Now you know. And the weird last name. And so I'm very sympathetic towards trying to view Vikings and Scandinavian history in a very nuanced light, right? It's not just that they were all evil and traitorous people that went backstabbing and raiding. But this game really does a great job of making that basically they were just, they're just doing their thing like everyone else does. And it actually presents a lot of the Christians as kind of this imperialistic force in England, which is funny because that's their homeland, right? And so it ends up doing, I think, a really poor job of trying to be at all nuanced between these types of things. And I think that's because it's Christianity. I think if it wasn't Christianity, they wouldn't care. Now, the amazing thing is not how the story in the game ends, which is kind of blah, but it's actually kind of what happens in history because it's these people that only knew raiding, only knew killing, and slave taking and stuff like that, were eventually converted to Christianity, right? And one of the images that was so powerful in the conversion of the Vikings and other Scandinavian groups to Christianity was the image of Christ from Revelation as a warrior, right? So they were able to actually see this foreign God in a way that they viewed their own spirituality, and eventually that helped to convert them, along with a lot of missionary efforts and things like that. And I think we forget that, like, as much as we want to historical series like the Vikings on history and Last Kingdom and this game try and lionize the Viking lifestyle or make it seem fun or cool or whatever, it's actually really bad. It was not a good thing. And it's a good thing that they were Christianized and that was actually ended. Although a lot of people don't really like that language today. But I think historically it's a good thing that people aren't raiding and destroying villages anymore and taking slaves, all that type of stuff. So just something I was thinking about it as I'm playing it this week. I'm probably going to finish it up soon. I wouldn't recommend it, not because of that. I just think it's kind of a lame addition. I would get the one that came before it, Odyssey, that takes place in ancient Greece. That one is much better. All right, everyone. I will see you tomorrow for mailbag, and I hope you have a good one. Peace out.